side of life.
Hi, I'm Harry Marks, and this is Let's All Go to the Lobby, your introduction to the film you're about to watch. Up next is a German expressionist silent film from 1928 that's more romance than horror, though you wouldn't know it from its main character. From Universal Pictures, this is The Man Who Laughs. The Man Who Laughs stars Conrad Veidt as Gwynplaine, the disfigured son of a disgraced nobleman. Gwynplaine, as a child, had a permanent smile carved into his face by comprachicos, or mythological groups of people who would perform deliberate mutilations on children. The term was coined by Victor Hugo, who wrote the 1869 novel on which the film was based. The Man Who Laughs was a story about a disfigured protagonist in love with a beautiful woman. Unsurprising from the man who also gave us The Hunchback of Notre Dame. In fact, the film version of The Man Who Laughs came about after Universal's success with their previous adaptation of Hunchback, starring Lon Chaney. They wanted Chaney to take the lead again in an adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera, but couldn't get it off the ground after the studio rejected the script. Instead, they decided to move forward with The Man Who Laughs, with Chaney playing Gwynplaine, made more difficult because a French studio already owned the rights to the novel. Chaney's contract was eventually renegotiated, and as a result, he was released from The Man Who Laughs. But he did get to choose his next project, which became 1925's The Phantom of the Opera. Conrad Veidt was chosen after he'd successfully played the somnambulist Cesare in 1920's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Veidt's makeup was done by Jack Pierce, the head of makeup at Universal, who would eventually go on to help create iconic movie monsters like Bela Lugosi's Dracula and Frankenstein's monster as portrayed by Boris Karloff. For Gwynplaine, he went with a pale, almost white complexion and darkened lips framing a set of stark white teeth. Veidt wore special dentures fitted with metal hooks that pulled the corners of his mouth back, creating the memorable and unsettling smile. It was so memorable, in fact, that this iteration of the character became something of an inspiration to a pair of comic book creators in search of a villain for their vigilante detective Batman. Bob Kane and Bill Finger used Veidt's portrayal of Gwynplaine as the model for Gotham's clown prince of crime, the Joker, including his white face and perpetual grin. The Man Who Laughs did not garner the same success as Hunchback or Phantom, but it did leave a lasting effect on the film industry and pop culture as a whole. It was also adapted for sound using the new movie tone system, which incorporated a synchronized score and sound effects on the actual film print, versus the old way of different venues playing their own musical accompaniments. And so here it is, starring Conrad Veidt, Mary Philbin, Julius Molnar, and Olga Baklanova, from director Paul Leni and Universal Pictures. This is 1928's The Man Who Laughs.